My name is David Moreno. I am 41 years old, and I want to tell you, Marcus, about the evening of December 23rd, when you looked at my daughter's place setting at Mom's dining table, picked up the plate, and said, "Gia eats in the kitchen. This seat's for Renata's boyfriend." And you said it the way someone tells a waiter they ordered sparkling, not still, like it was a correction, like my 9-year-old daughter was a logistical error in your seating chart. I want you to know what I was thinking at the exact moment you said it. You said, "Gia eats in the kitchen. This seat's for Renata's boyfriend." And I said, "Put the plate back, Marcus." You heard a request. What you couldn't hear was the decision I had already made. My hand was resting on the back of Gia's chair, and I could feel the grain of the wood under my thumb. I pressed into it hard enough to leave an impression in the pad of my finger. I didn't blink. I didn't raise my voice. Something in me had already shifted from brother to something else entirely. Something colder. Something that counted. But I'm not here to talk to Marcus, not really. He'll hear this eventually, or he won't. What I'm here to do is talk to you. Before I tell you what I found when I started looking, what time is it where you are? I want to know how many people heard something they recognized in that opening. Because the thing about a plate being removed from a table is that it sounds small. It sounds like a seating disagreement. It's not. It never was. Let me tell you what I do for a living. I'm a municipal building code compliance officer. I spend my days walking through structures that look finished, walls painted, lights installed, occupancy permits framed behind the reception desk, and I find the things that were done wrong underneath. Missed fire stops behind drywall, load-bearing modifications made without permits, electrical panels with breakers that don't match the labeled circuits. I find the gap between what a building says it is and what it actually is. I do this with my hands, with measurements, with records filed at the county clerk's office, and with a kind of patience most people don't understand. I've spent 16 years catching the difference between a structure that looks sound and one that is sound. That skill had exposed fraudulent contractor work on 271 municipal inspections. It was about to expose my own brother. The smell hit me before the memory did. That's always how it works. I walked into my mother's house that December evening, and the cedar and garlic smell of her holiday kitchen filled my nose the way it had every Christmas since I was 5. And before I even set the bag of gifts on the counter, my hands were already checking the doorframe. Habit. 16 years of habit. I ran my thumb along the hinge plate and noticed the screws were stripped. The door would sag within a year. Nobody asked me to check. Nobody noticed I had. That's how my mind works. I assess structures before I assess situations, and I should have been assessing my situation a long time ago. Our family was built on a blueprint that looked like love, but was engineered like a hierarchy. My father passed when I was 19. Marcus was 24. Mom leaned on Marcus because he was the eldest, and because he was loud and certain in the way that frightened people sometimes mistake for leadership. I was the quiet one, the one who fixed things, the one who showed up with tools and left with nothing but the certainty that the next call would come soon. When Mom's roof needed replacing in 2014, I took 2 weeks off work, sourced the materials at contractor cost through my municipal connections, and did the tear-off and re-shingle myself. Marcus showed up on the last day with a case of beer and told everyone at dinner that he'd handled Mom's roof situation. I didn't correct him. When Mom's property tax bill spiked in 2018 because of a reassessment error, I spent 3 evenings at the county assessor's office pulling comparable valuations and filed the appeal myself. Marcus told our cousins he'd taken care of it. I didn't correct him then, either. The irony is that I spent every working day identifying structures where the person who did the actual work was not the person whose name was on the permit. I documented that discrepancy for a living. And I went home every holiday and lived inside one. When I adopted Gia, she was 4. She came to me through the foster system after 2 years of placements that didn't hold. The paperwork took 14 months. The home study alone required 3 separate visits, background checks on every adult in my household, and a financial audit that would have made a mortgage underwriter blush. I did it alone. Marcus never asked about the process. Mom came to the finalization hearing and cried, and I thought that meant something had shifted. It hadn't. Marcus treated Gia like a guest who had overstayed. Not with cruelty exactly, that would have required him to acknowledge her enough to be cruel, with absence. He didn't buy her birthday gifts, he bought gifts for Renata's kids, his stepdaughter's children, wrapped in coordinated paper with printed tags. Gia's name was never on a tag. At Thanksgiving 2022, Gia made a card for every family member. She drew a turkey for Marcus with colored pencils and wrote Uncle Marcus with a backwards S. He left it on the counter. I found it in the recycling bin the next morning, under a pizza box. The card had a grease stain on the turkey's head. I took it home. I still have it. Mom saw these things. She saw them and she narrated them differently. Marcus is just slower to warm up. He's protective of the family traditions. Give him time, David. Time. As though my daughter was a flavor he needed to develop a taste for. So when Marcus picked up Gia's plate on December 23rd and told me she'd eat in the kitchen, so Renata's boyfriend, a man I had met exactly once, 6 weeks earlier, at a barbecue where he burned 4 hot dogs and called my mother Mrs. Could sit at the table, I understood something I had been refusing to understand. This was not about a chair, this was about who belonged, and Marcus had decided, years ago, that my daughter did not. I put Gia's plate back. I served her dinner. I sat next to her. Marcus rolled his eyes and said, "You always make things into a production, David." Gia ate her food without looking up. She had learned to make herself small at that table, and the fact that she had learned it meant she'd been taught it, and the fact that she'd been taught it meant I had let it happen. That was the night everything changed. When we got home, Gia was asleep in the back seat by the time I pulled into the driveway. I carried her inside, 47 pounds, her head against my collarbone, and I sat on the edge of her bed after I tucked her in. I stared at the wall for a long time. The numbers started running without my permission. I was thinking about my mother's house, not emotionally, structurally. Marcus had been living in the back unit of Mom's property, a converted garage apartment, since 2019. He told everyone he was helping Mom with the house. Rent-free, utilities included. Mom paid the property tax, the insurance and the maintenance. I knew this because I'd helped Mom set up her budget spreadsheet in 2020 when she was worried about her fixed income covering the rising costs. I had seen every line item. Marcus's name did not appear on a single expense. He was not helping with the house. He was living in it for free, and he was deciding who deserved to sit at the table inside it. That was when I started looking. The first thing I checked was the property record. County Assessor's Office, parcel number 44710230009. Mom's property, her name on the deed since 1997 when Dad paid it off. I pulled the current title record on my lunch break, the way I pull title records on commercial properties every week. It took 4 minutes. And the name on the most recent quitclaim deed, filed in October 2023, 2 months before that dinner, was not my mother's. It was Marcus David Moreno, co-owner, right of survivorship. I stared at the screen. I set my coffee down. I read the filing date 3 times, October 9th, 2023. My mother had not mentioned this. My mother, who called me every Sunday morning to talk about her garden and her telenovela opinions, had not mentioned that she had signed over half her house to Marcus. Or, and this was the part that made my vision narrow, she had not been told what she was signing. I did not call Marcus. I did not call Mom. I went to the county clerk's office during my lunch hour the next day, requested the original document, and sat in the records room with the physical filing. The quitclaim deed was 1 page, standard form, my mother's signature at the bottom, notarized, but I do this for a living. I read documents the way other people read menus, not for what's on them, but for what shouldn't be. The notary stamp. I recognized the name, Letitia Varga. She was a mobile notary Marcus had used for a vehicle title transfer 2 years earlier. I'd been in the room when she came to the house. She was not my mother's notary, she was Marcus's. And the witness signature line, the second signature required on the form, was signed by Renata Delgado, Marcus's girlfriend. Then I found something else. I requested the full chain of title documents for the property. In the stack was a second filing, a deed of trust, dated November 2023, 1 month after the quitclaim. Marcus had taken a home equity line of credit against the property, $62,000. My mother's house, the house my father paid off in 1997, the house where I reshingled the roof with my own hands, had been leveraged for $62,000. The lender was a private lending company, not a bank. The interest rate was 14%, and the disbursement went to an account number I didn't recognize. I traced the lender. I called them directly, identified myself as a family member with a concern about a potential elder financial exploitation situation, and asked what documentation had been provided. The loan officer wouldn't give me specifics without authorization, but she said something that mattered. She said the application listed the borrower as the sole owner of the property. Marcus had told the lender my mother's name was no longer on the deed. He had filed the quitclaim specifically to make this loan possible. That brought me to the older pattern. I went back to the county records and searched Marcus's name across all filing types, and there it was. In 2020, Marcus had filed a small claims judgment against a former roommate for $8,000 in property damage. The judgment was entered by default. The roommate never responded. I tracked down the roommate through a mutual friend. His name was Carlos Padilla. He told me there was no property damage. Marcus had threatened to report him for an immigration issue that didn't exist unless he agreed to let the judgment stand. Marcus had used the judgment to establish a credit line. That credit line had been used to purchase the vehicle that Letissa Varga had notarized the title transfer for. This wasn't impulsive, this was a system. Marcus built financial structures the way unlicensed contractors build additions: no permits, no inspections, and the person living inside has no idea the floor isn't level until it collapses. Marcus, I want to make sure you understand what I found, because the next part is the part you thought no one would find. The $62,000 from the home equity line had been dispersed to an LLC, MD Moreno Property Holdings, registered in Nevada. Filing date, August 2023, 2 months before the quitclaim deed. Marcus had created the entity before he had my mother sign anything. The LLC had been used to put a deposit on a rental property in Palmdale, a 4-unit building. The deposit was $58,000. Marcus was using my mother's home equity to build a real estate portfolio under an LLC she didn't know existed, secured by a house she didn't know she'd signed away. I printed everything, every filing, every date, every signature. I put them in a binder, not because I'm dramatic, because I'm a code compliance officer, and when I document a violation, I build the file so completely that there is no gap for an appeal. Mom hosted her annual New Year's Day open house. She'd done it every year since 2001. The living room with the plastic-covered furniture pushed against the walls, the folding tables with the tamales and the pozole, the framed photos on the hallway wall. Marcus loved this event. He loved standing in the living room of a house he was not paying for, greeting people who believed he was the one holding the family together. His monument, his stage. I arrived at 2 in the afternoon. Gia wore her new dress, dark blue with white buttons, the one she'd picked out herself. I made sure she ate first, made sure she was settled with her cousins in the backyard, and then I walked into the living room where Marcus was holding court near the fireplace with a beer in his hand, talking to our uncle about the market. I set the binder on the coffee table. Marcus looked at it. "What's that?" "Your filings," I said. "My what?" "The quitclaim deed you had Mom sign in October. The home equity line you took out in November. The LLC you registered in August. The $62,000 currently securing a deposit on a property in Palmdale." The room didn't go silent all at once. It went silent in a wave. Uncle first, then Aunt Rosa, then Mom, who had come out of the kitchen holding a serving spoon. Marcus laughed. "David, come on. You're doing this here? This is family business. The lender's file says you listed yourself as sole owner. That's a technicality. Mom wanted me on the deed. She asked me to handle her finances." I turned to Mom. "Did you know you signed a quitclaim deed transferring half ownership of your house to Marcus?" She stared at me. She stared at the binder. "He said it was for the insurance, in case something happened to me, so the house wouldn't go to probate." "Did you know he took out a $62,000 loan against the house?" Her hand tightened on the serving spoon. "What loan?" Marcus stepped forward. "David, you're upsetting Mom. This is exactly what you do. You take something simple and you make it into a federal case because you need to be the hero." I didn't respond. You've always been jealous, he continued. Ever since I moved in to help Mom, you've been looking for a reason to make me look bad. Is this about Christmas? About the chair? Because if your feelings are hurt about a seating arrangement. The notary was Letitia Varga, your notary. The witness was Renata, your girlfriend. So what? Mom needed someone there. I arranged it. Renata, who had been standing near the kitchen doorway, set her drink down and left the room. She didn't say a word. I watched her go. That was when Aunt Rosa spoke. Rosa was my father's sister. She had been a paralegal at a real estate firm for 26 years. She had been standing by the hallway, listening. She walked to the coffee table, opened the binder, and turned to the quitclaim deed. She read it for about 40 seconds. Then she looked at Marcus. Marcus, this deed transfers ownership with right of survivorship. When your mother passes, you inherit the entire property automatically. David gets nothing, and this home equity line. She turned a page. This is a lien. If the payments aren't made, the lender forecloses on your mother's house while she's living in it. Marcus said, Rosa, with all respect, this is between me and my brother. Rosa didn't look at him. She looked at my mother. Elena, did anyone explain to you what right of survivorship means before you signed this? My mother didn't answer. She looked at Marcus. And I watched something I had never seen in my mother's face, the moment she stopped believing her eldest son's version of the room. I said the only thing I needed to say. I said it to Marcus, standing in his living room that wasn't his living room, on his stage that wasn't his stage. You moved my daughter's plate so your girlfriend's boyfriend could sit at a table you don't own, in a house you were stealing. I didn't elaborate. There was nothing left to add. The weeks after that unfolded the way weight falls, not all at once, but with the slow inevitability of a structure that was never up to code. Mom retained an attorney. Aunt Rosa connected her with a colleague who specialized in elder financial exploitation. The attorney filed a petition to void the quitclaim deed on the basis of undue influence and inadequate disclosure. A judge granted a temporary restraining order, freezing the home equity line within 9 days. Marcus could not draw further funds. He could not make payments on the Palmdale property deposit without the line. By February, the deposit was forfeited. $58,000 gone. The private lender initiated recovery proceedings against Marcus individually, since the court had frozen the lien against Mom's property. His credit was functionally destroyed within 60 days. Marcus moved out of the back unit in March. Mom didn't ask him to leave. The attorney did. The letter cited the pending legal proceedings and recommended physical separation during the investigation. Marcus moved into Renata's apartment. By April, Renata had asked him to leave too. I heard this from our cousin, not from Marcus. I didn't ask for details. The Nevada LLC was dissolved by the state for failure to file an annual report. Marcus hadn't set up the registered agent correctly. He'd used the address of the Palmdale property he no longer had a deposit on. The dissolution was administrative, automatic, and final. Mom asked me to come over on a Saturday in May. She made coffee. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where Gia's plate had been removed, and she said, I should have seen it. I didn't tell her it was okay. It wasn't okay. I told her I understood why she hadn't seen it, and that the important thing was what happened now. I changed the locks on the back unit that afternoon. I checked the door frames while I was there. The screws were still stripped. Renata called me in June. Not to apologize for witnessing the quitclaim signing without telling my mother what it meant. Not exactly, she said. I didn't understand what I was signing as a witness. He told me it was routine. I asked her if she'd read the document before she signed it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, no. I told her I appreciated the call. I did not tell her it was fine, because it wasn't, and I did not tell her I forgave her, because forgiveness requires something more than a phone call 5 months after the fact. But the call was something. It was a small, insufficient, real thing. Gia started art classes in April. She'd been asking since 2nd grade. I'd always said we'd get to it, but the weekends had been full of driving to Mom's, fixing things at Mom's, attending events at Mom's where my daughter learned to eat quietly and make herself small. The classes were on Saturday mornings at a community center 12 minutes from our house. She painted a portrait of our dog, a deeply inaccurate but passionate portrait, and it's on the refrigerator now. She signed it Gia Moreno, in the bottom corner, in letters that faced the right direction. There's one thing I never said to you directly, Marcus. I'm going to say it now. You didn't just take Mom's house. You made my daughter believe she didn't have a seat, and I let you do it long enough that she learned how to stand. It's a Sunday morning now, late spring. Gia and I are at the kitchen table. She's painting. I'm filling out paperwork, a permit application, actually, for a deck I'm building in the backyard, our backyard. It's a small deck, nothing complicated, cedar boards, standard footings, everything to code. I wrote the dimensions on the application in neat block letters, 12 feet by 10 feet. The materials cost comes to $1,600, which I've saved in an envelope in the kitchen drawer. It's not $62,000. It's the cost of a thing I'm building correctly, on ground that belongs to me, for a girl who belongs at every table she chooses to sit at. What I actually learned, not the lesson I'd package for someone else, but the one that lives in my ribs now, is that silence and loyalty wore the same clothes in my family for so long that I stopped checking which one had walked into the room. I thought keeping the peace meant enduring the terms. I thought being the one who showed up with tools and left without credit was the same as being good. It wasn't goodness. It was a habit I dressed up as virtue because the alternative, saying this is wrong out loud, in the room where it was happening, would have required me to dismantle the only structure I'd never inspected. My own. Consequences are not revenge. I didn't build that binder to destroy Marcus. I built it because a 9-year-old girl drew a turkey with a backwards S for a man who threw it in the recycling, and because a 71-year-old woman signed a document she didn't understand while the people she trusted most in the world stood in the room and let it happen. Consequences are what was always owed. They are the inspection that should have been done years ago. They are the code finally being enforced. Is there someone in your life you've been describing in third person, to friends, to yourself, in the privacy of your own thoughts, because saying it to them directly would require you to believe your own version of events first? What would you say if you finally believed it? And would you say it before or after they moved someone else's plate? This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, education, and dramatic reflection. We hope it reminded you that your dignity is not negotiable, and that setting a boundary, even a painful one, can be an act of love for yourself and everyone the pattern would have reached next.